Hold on. Welcome to Alignment. My name is Dasha Kelly Hamilton. I'm going to be your host for this conversation today about cities. And we're excited to have two guests from two different ends of the state. And we are excited to hear what your thoughts are. Just know if you have any commentary, you have the little chat line. Please make a comment. We're going to bring it into our conversation. And today it's going to be alignment around this line. The great, proud city sees with a strange love. What does that mean to you? Alignment is an opportunity to bring one line of poetry in between two complete strangers and figure out what stories they have in common and definitely their unique ways upon the world. And I will share the poem this line comes from at the end of the program. Trust me, you're going to be way more interested in these two gentlemen that have made time to join us today. And our first guest, all the way from down the street, based in Milwaukee, please welcome Ruben Gaona to the stage. How are you, sir?
I'm blessed, motivated and dedicated and highly educated. How you been?
I'm working to have that be my greeting. That's a way to get going and let folks know how you stand and walk through the world. And could you please say your name? I feel like my tongue and my mouth ruined it a bit. So please pronounce your last name for me.
It is Ruben Gaona.
Ruben Gaona. I was kind of close. Would you give me a kind of close?
You were pretty close, much closer than a lot of people are.
And how do you, and with someone who has one of those names, I even had in my marriage, I was someone else. So clearly I didn't even have to be in that wedding because he got my name all wrong. So I can appreciate, being protective of your name, and you add that extra layer of there's a way to say it that we can butcher. So how did you get to a point of being gracious about people kind of sort of getting your name close to right and not really?
I think I just learned to embrace it and understand that we all have a different walk in life. So some people might be able to pronounce it, some people might not be able to pronounce it. But at the end of the day, I think my character dictates who I am more than my name. So I have a lot of values on my last name. And
nice. I appreciate that. And I'm just kind of going back to the tantrums I've had about my name in the past. So I've grown. So tell us, with all of this peace in your posture, give us your whole life story. Who are you?
Oh, so who is Ruben? Ruben is I'm originally from El Paso, Texas. I was born there in June of 1980, 1981. My birthday's
Okay.
coming up in about 3 weeks, about to be the big 4-0. I moved to Mexican parents. My mom, my dad, they're both from Mexico. Both immigrated down to El Paso. They got to connected with each other. Eventually, I was born. At the age of 15, my mom decided to move up to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I embraced Milwaukee as my second home. It was a whole different culture shock, being that I've learned real quickly how segregated Milwaukee was from El Paso, Texas,
Hmm.
and I embraced that, and it was a shock that even by walking down the streets, certain colors I could wear and certain colors I couldn't wear. As in El Paso, I could wear anything I wanted to without being looked at differently. And here, get raised in the south side of Milwaukee, it was
Hmm.
like, oh, you can. Why are you wearing yellow and black? It means a gang affiliation. Are you related to that gang? And I was like, no.
No, I'm just fly
No.
today. That's all.
I'm like, I'm just dressed to impress. And they're like, no, you need to go change, And so it was different, but I embraced it now as close to being 40 and being here since I was in the age of 15 as my home away from home. This is actually my home. I love it. It means a lot to me. I've been one of the guys who have caused a lot of harm to this city,
Hmm.
but at the same time, I'm one that's giving more to this city to cure from all the harm that I have caused.
Check you out. I'm curious to know. I'm an army brat, so I'm a military brat. So moving was
Same
part of
here.
our family experience, and it's one of the things I wouldn't change it for anything. Although, and I also had peers, and that it was difficult, and change is a whole thing. So at that age, and I went to that because more often I found that the kids whose parents started having them travel with them later in life, it was harder to make those adjustments. And I've been doing this since I was 4, right? So at 15, you've got a whole set of everything, your favorite place for music, your favorite place for pizza, you got your homies, you got how, and that can be a huge and traumatic adjustment. Would that lead to you claiming, framing yourself as a problem in the city, or that's just a huge marker in your story?
I never thought about that. I know at the age of 15, I was heavily involved in sports when I was in El Paso, Texas. And I grew up in Segundo Barrio, which is the second ward. At
Mm.
that time, it was one of the worst areas to grow up in, the side of town. But you always had this dream that you wanted to attend Bowie High School, and you wanted to play football in that football field because he had the most beautiful football field that I've ever seen and you ever seen growing up. So I told my mom, I remember telling my mom at that age, if we move from El Paso, I will not play sports no more. I will not play any other sports. If I'm not playing for Bowie High School, I'm not playing at all. And I think she took it as a joke. And literally, when we moved up here, I stopped playing every sport. Didn't play no football, didn't play no baseball, didn't play no soccer. I was
Yeah.
more like, so with all that free time left in your hands, obviously I got associated with a bunch of friends that we were at that time, we might want to say we were standing up for our own beliefs because we went to
Okay.
a school in the South Side that it was particularly there wasn't a lot of Hispanic people. So we had to unite together and especially there was not a lot of people that were not in gangs. So I was not in a gang. I did not want to join a gang. I've always looked at myself more of a leader, so I didn't think I was
Mhm.
prepared mentally ready to be in a gang. Because if I'm going to be in a gang, I want to be the one leading the gang. I don't want to be the one following everybody else. So,
How do you
so
overachieve into
so my godmother always told me, growing up, that I was destined to be a lot more than I am. I was destined to be a leader. So I always kept that in my mind. And
Mm.
so I never joined a gang, but we created a group organization to protect ourselves from being a gang. We tend to look at it as a party crew. So that, maybe that played a lot of time into who I became ultimately, because I mean, I had a lot of free time to do whatever I wanted to do because I wasn't playing sports.
Check it out. And on this end of that narrative, so I'm just would be really interested to hear, how are you? You said you're now creating space, or you're creating good.
Oh yeah. So now what I did, in 2010, I ended up getting out of the military. I'm a Navy veteran as well myself. You know, I came out, got medically retired in 2007, and endured. Came back to Milwaukee while I was here. Got involved in illegal activities, which landed me in prison. Got sentenced to
Mm.
10 years for my first offense. It was a federal case, drug-related crime, nonviolence, but they sentenced me to 120 months. So coming back out of prison in 2017, in 2015, I made it my own purpose and destiny to help people understand that we are more than the mistake that we made. We made a mistake, but that did not define who we are. You know, so I wrote a quote in 2015 that I can't does not exist. It is an excuse we tell ourselves to not reach our true potential. And I would no longer tell myself that I couldn't do things. It was more of how I wanted to do things and not allow other people to tell me that I couldn't be someone or couldn't do anything. So I practice that now here. You know, I'm one of the co-founders for The Way Out, where we're breaking the cycle of incarceration through technology and living wage jobs. So we created an app called My Way Out, where we work with people and reentry service providers to assist people, formerly incarcerated people, to reintegrate back into society and hopefully reduce recidivism.
I know at this moment my heart wants to explode, to have that be a full circle story. And if you just started in 2017, you're just beginning. So even in these early days, oh, please tell me how sweet it is, and the challenges, and that's going to keep it going.
You know, I came out in 2017, became a case manager for a year. And then I still thought in my heart that there's needed a lot more to do. So I became a state employer. I applied to become a state employer, even though I was told that I would never be able to become a state employer because of my criminal background. So there I fell back to that thinking of, don't tell me I can't do something, because I will no longer allow anyone to tell me I can't do something. So I applied for the position, got hired as a state employee, became an employment training specialist, worked in the reentry pipeline program for Wisconsin, assisted people taking the 2-week program. And I was like, there's more that needs to be done. There has to be something I could do. So in 2019, I met my partner, Eli Rivera, which we both had the same mindset, the same goals, the same views. And we're like, you know what? So we kicked it off in 2020, and here we are. There has been a lot of challenges, especially, you know, as a startup company, and especially a minority startup company. Two formerly incarcerated people starting up a company,
The
and just,
nerve.
yes, you know, and I think anybody that's familiar with a startup company, how it goes, you know, with VCs, only 3% people, black and brown people, get funding. So now imagine you being a black and brown company, a BIPOC company, and being a formerly incarcerated. Two individuals of the company are the two co-founders are formerly incarcerated. So it gives you that challenge. But we've been embraced by our city. I think Milwaukee has been one of the cities that has opened their arms back to us and say, you know what, we need something like this in Wisconsin, not only in Milwaukee, but in Wisconsin. We need someone that's doing what you guys are doing. So how can we help? So we've gotten a great amount of assistance from our communities and great organizations such as the AmFam generator that's been able to step up to the plate
Oh,
and
sure.
say, how can we help you?
Huh. Well, speaking of the city responding to the need, this great proud city seized with a strange love. Where did that line of language take you?
Oh Lord, you know, I I read that line, and I think the first train of thought that came to my mind was March 1st, 2017, getting on the Greyhound bus, walking out of Alton Federal Correctional Institute, and saying, okay, I'm going back to my city. I'm going back to Milwaukee. What am I gonna do? You know, this is like a great city. It is a proud city that I love, that I call home, that I embrace as my home. But at the same time, it has this strange love, because while I was there the last time, I did not give it that correct love that I was supposed to give it. I was giving it the wrong love, not taking care of it, and it took it from me and say, you know what, we need to put kind of like a timeout on you, and hopefully when you come back and revisit and call it home again, then you give it your all and you're able to provide assistance to people. So it took me to that day that I was released from federal prison.
What you know what's tender about that perspective is to treat the city as a partner, a friend, a lover, a colleague that you owe an apology to, that you mistreated in some way. And that's really refreshing for me. I know I've heard young people, for example, say, well, why would I leave? For everything this city needs, why would I take all of this in me and take it someplace else? I want to make my home better. I want to make where I'm from better, stronger, whatever their perspective is. And that was just really tender, especially knowing the challenge that the city is also going to hand you. And to give the city the grace, like a person, that it's the way it was raised.
Yes.
It's the way the city was raised, not even how it wants to be right now. So I really appreciate that. And it seems like that you and the city are reconciling quite nicely, full transparency and healthily.
I look at it as a marriage. We're 2-in-1 now. All right. So that's how I look at it. Like I've embraced Milwaukee as my home. I love it here. I've often discussed with other people when they ask me, Ruben, if you were to ever get wealthy, would you move out of Wisconsin? No. I not only came back to the city to Milwaukee, but I came back to the neighborhood where I was creating damage, because I wanted to show people that, you know what, this is my baby. This is me here. I'm from the South Side. I caused the harm. Now I'm gonna fix it. We're married. We're thinking for better or for worse. Now
I've done my worst part. Now I'm for the better part.
Now we're on our better days, and we're gonna make it better, and we're gonna get it right. Why go somewhere else when this is home? Why not fix your own home before you go to a different home?
Oh man, I'm inspired. I'm someone who's forever talking about getting on an airplane, getting out of this place. So, and there's that relationship where there's more, and all of the all is there. So I personally appreciate this reminder of what we're here for and what we're doing. And I definitely salute the choices that you've made, all of them, even the ones that got you in trouble. Those were you trying to be independent, and the backup choices to continue to keep living. So that's all we get to do every day, is to make a different choice today. I'm going to have you come back and tell me a little bit more about your story, but I'm going to bring our next guest onto the screen, if that's okay. So our next guest makes their way all the way up from northern part of the state, joining us from Portage. Please welcome Mr. Greg Wright to the screen. How are you, Greg?
Good. How are you?
I would say fantastic. I feel pretty good today.
It's great to see you again. Yeah.
I got my hair. The hair is doing it today. Yeah. Yeah.
It's working. Yeah.
So, and I don't know how gentlemen, if your hair argues with you sometimes, and we have a whole conversation. Hair, what are we doing today? Here's what I was thinking. The hair says maybe or nah. Today we are working together. So, gentlemen, I don't want to presume that you have the same hair curl issues.
I have some humidity issues in my hair, so usually this time of year I just buzz it because it's just a lot easier. So I'm trying to make it through a full summer without getting annoyed with my hair getting puffy and cutting it all off. So we'll see.
I'm guessing 3 solid products to get you through the summer.
Taking some time to learn, but yeah, I'm getting there.
Fair enough.
As I'm not too active during the day, I should be okay.
Oh, I want you to be your full active self. Let those curls fly. Curls fly. Well, so besides from having a great barber and lovely hair, tell us a bit more about who you are and what your whole life story is.
Yeah, so Greg Wright, I'm the executive director of an organization called Create Portage County. We're here in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, like I said, in the northern part of the state. And grew up in Stevens Point. Went to high school here, left after high school for college, and was one of those people who said, I'm never coming back to this place. Rear view mirror, say goodbye forever. Ended up in Minnesota for college, ended up in the Twin Cities after that, then San Francisco for a while, and Chicago for a while, and then started getting this itch to come back. And so about 10 years ago, I moved back to Stevens Point, which I initially said I was going to do for like a couple of years just to try it out. And now it's hard to imagine leaving. After all this time. Yeah.
What was the itch? And that's especially in comparison to Ruben's story of describing his relationship with Milwaukee, like this marriage that he stepped out on, but he's back full focused and all in love again. What was the itch, especially with so so determined not to be in Stevens Point?
Yeah, I think some of it was, so I lived in really wonderful cities that I had a really great time in. But when I was there, I heard a lot of conversations about what small town America was like, and it didn't fit with my perspective of my experience growing up here. So I found myself often in these conversations where I was like defending, like if you came to my hometown, you'd experience something different from what you think it's like there. Especially when I was in California, it wasn't just being in a small town; it was being in a small town in the flyover country, right? And so having friends who were totally dismissive of the Midwest, and then especially dismissive of small town in the Midwest, I just kept telling them things about, well, if you came to visit me, I could take you here. We could do this. You would see this. You would have this experience, and sort of through fighting, through a love for my community again, was like, oh, maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, and so sort of changed my own frame of reference through the process of those conversations.
What was well, two things. One, my husband, before he thought that all of the Midwest was just this gray, on the map is just this gray block. He was like, oh, people live there? Yeah, because he's from Philly and he lived in Georgia and then all the way to the other end of the coast. He was in Alaska for a long time, but just the Midwest was there weren't people here and didn't even have the stereotype or this distilled expectation of what Midwest or small town was like. So it was, I don't even know what's worse, having a negative perspective or just, we didn't count at all. You didn't think about it at all. Yeah. So that's the one thing I was thinking about when you're talking about having these friends that you had to defend what it was like where you're from. So getting back to where you're from, what was that reentry like?
I mean, I'll say it was a culture shock at first, especially, I lived in Chicago before moving back. Chicago and Stevens Point are very different sized communities with very different cultures. But, there is something to be said though about like as I've grown, my understanding of how to live well here, Stevens Point feels like a Chicago neighborhood that just got plopped in the middle of nowhere. There's a lot of similarities. That something I loved about Chicago again was the neighborhood feel to it. So it was a bunch of really small towns just packed in really tight to each other, but they all have their little downtown. They all have their neighborhood culture and feel and festival and and so that was part of where I started to reappreciate where I was from, was recognizing some similarities there. And so, there's a lot of shifting that we need to do to get to that vibe entirely, but we're starting to see that take off here. A little bit more of a stronger neighborhood identity, more arts and culture happening, greater diversity happening in the community. And so, so like I said, initially it was a culture shock, but it was also really informative. And as somebody who, likes creativity and entrepreneurship, it was like, well, there are all these things I know that happen other places, and I can start to see if I can make some of those things happen here. And so, I just had this arsenal of tricks of what made cities cool that I could come and try to filter through our smaller town lens and see if we could make some of that same stuff happen here as well.
I think what would be interesting for you to share how the just your language and the level of agency that you have in talking about what you and your organization are going to do for the city. And you're not an elected official. So what is that relationship? And it kind of goes to, again, pointing back to Ruben, we don't have to defer that to people that we elect. There's a ownership. I personally think that I have an ownership of my part of the city. So talk a little bit about that, how it's received, the responsibility, that's a lot. And it's also pretty remarkable that you get to think that way in the work that you do.
I think I've really fallen in love with the role nonprofits can play in community change, especially in an era where I think we too often just defer to politics. We say, our elected officials should take care of this stuff for us. I think what I've learned over time is that a group of committed community members can do a lot of the work prior to when government needs to get involved, and that it's a lot harder for government not to support somebody if a group of people in the community are showing up and saying, this is what we want and this is how we want to do things. And so in a lot of ways, people have described the work we do. We're officially started as an arts organization. We're kind of now a creativity of all forms organization. But people have described the work itself as community organizing, that we're trying to bring people together around shared goals and getting them excited about something. And if we need to get them to show up to a city meeting, we can. If we need to get them to show up to a fundraiser, we can. If we needed to get them to show up and do work at some project, we can. And so it's, I think that's what we found more and more is connecting people who have a common goal together can do a lot. And again, there's a lot you can do where people can't really get in your way. If you decide you want to treat people better, you can do that as a community. If you decide you want to support people through a project, you can do that as a community. You don't need an ordinance or a government mandate to do that sort of work. And so, so that's what we've been trying to show is that opportunity is there, and we're positioned as an organization to say yes to as many opportunities that come through our door. Like we just want to, somebody comes in, they say, I want to do this. I think it'll make our community better. We say, we have resources. Let's see if we can make it happen together, and try to get as many of those projects off the ground as we can.
Ooh, the government folks, they love and hate to see you coming. I can only, I can only imagine. Well, tell us, with that kind of a key to the city approach and relationship, what did this line of poetry mean to you?
So it was actually interesting when I read the line. The first thing I thought of was actually Chicago and not Stevens Point. And I thought of Chicago because, and this relates to me moving back, I remember when I was teaching there in Chicago, so I was a high school English teacher. I worked at Walter Payton College Prep, go Grizzlies, for 5 years while I was in Chicago. And what really struck me when I was there is that every kid I taught loved Chicago immensely. They had, to use the quote, strange love for the city. And it really made me jealous because I grew up in a community where you weren't allowed to love your city that much, where you were taught that success was getting out and going someplace else. And so to listen to these incredible kids say, even if I leave for college, I'm gonna grow up and move back. I'm gonna make a life here. I'm gonna have an impact on the city that I love. It felt very strange to me, but it helped me start to understand that, like, if I really wanted to have an impact on my own community, the first thing I had to do was check my pride issues that I had about living there and feeling like I wasn't a success if I was there. And I think that's, having now done work in small towns in a lot of communities in Wisconsin, that's the biggest thing we see is that they really have a pride shortfall, that people are taught that they can't feel successful if they stay in small places or even move back to small places, and that's having a really negative effect on who does stay, or how people feel when they are back, or what they feel like they can do to invest in those communities. And so a lot of where we started our work was just saying, like, let's be proud of this place, let's give people the language to be proud about this place, let's infect this place with that same strange love I felt so much in Chicago, and see if we can get people to rethink this as a long-term investment instead of a short-term stay.
Wow. Huh. And love is strange anyway, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you frame it that way. And again, both of you describing this as an interesting and an intimate and challenging relationship. And you are so right. I wonder how, so there's the geography and a mentality of a small town in a big city. And there's also generationally, definitely you were told that you need to get up and go off somewhere, go to school, go to the military, just go. And those that stayed behind, and we passed that on, or it was passed down to us, and then we passed it to our kids and students. And now we have these, like you said, this generation of young people who are like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me. Or if I leave, it's because I want to leave, not to prove that I've made it or I'm worth something. There is a Mike Rowe. So he's a voice actor, Dirty Jobs performer, and he goes to Congress every year and does these presentation about VOTEC, about vocational positions. And I remember watching one and thought, you're right. They said, we've told 3 generations now that college is the only way that they're going to ever have a life. And we've narrowed down the most expensive, biggest gamble. And we have these generationally, we're paying for it and hawk for it. And that's another one where young people are now saying, or I can just learn the things I need, or I can take a different approach, and are giving themselves options. So you can be in your same hometown and not get a 4-year degree and become an entrepreneur and still decide you can run the city and also be about community. Both of you are talking about, like you said, what people can do together is always going to trump what an individual can figure out on their own, or an elected official, or someone in law enforcement. Are we going to figure that out? Are you finding people believing that yet?
I mean, I think we're getting closer to it, right? And I actually think the pandemic in some ways has been helpful because I think it disrupted so many things about the way we did our lives that we're starting to question where our priorities are and what our values are. But I mean, I agree entirely with what you're saying. We talk all the time here about how the maker movement is super trendy, but manufacturing jobs are still like looked down upon. Like nobody's making more stuff than somebody who works at a manufacturing plant, right? Like, and so there are these interesting disconnects. The local farm to table movement is strong, but you work in ag and you get looked down upon, right? And so how have we disconnected these like cultural trends we see as really valuable, but a lot of the workers who are doing that work don't get valued in the same sort of way, and I think a lot of it is about letting go of, I think we as a nation have an obsession with like singularity, right? Like this is what a successful path looks like. This is what you should be doing. So it's college, house, marriage, 2.2 kids or whatever it ends up being. And instead of saying like there are all these incredible paths and all of those paths have options for success. And so you can be successful in a small town, you can be successful in a big city, you can be successful as a nomad who moves around the world working remotely. Like you don't have to ever identify with a community specifically. And all of those paths can be successful depending on what you do with that choice, not the choice itself.
I'm going to bring Ruben back on. You just landed on everything he's about. It's not just about the choice you make. It's what you do with the choices that you have. You better come and bring us some church over here on some poems. Thank you both. Your outlooks on place. I really respect how not only do they guide how you relate to the work that you do, but they also guide how you move through the city. As someone who is in a fallen back into love, someone who was protecting and sharing how relationships should go. And so how are these cities treating you both back?
Welcoming. It's embracing to see when you show love. One of the things that Greg touched upon was, at the community, what are we doing at the community to make change? Sometimes we don't gotta depend on those public officials, like you say. One of the things I often say is we're one team, one fight. And this we're all the same team in this community. And now how are we gonna fight this epidemic that we're going to, whatever it is, whether it be violence, crime, drugs, anything that has to do with it, but how can we make it better all together? And just being able to give that and provide resources to people that were unaware of it has been so welcoming by the community. So I have nothing but love.
Yeah, I mean, I have a similar experience. It's the bolder I've gotten in admitting I love this place, the more people love the work I do here. And so, I think a lot of people are looking for that permission too. And, and most people, not everyone has the luxury of choosing where they live, but people who are where they are usually are relatively happy with their experience. And so, so there's something to be said about giving people permission to start sharing that story and sharing that language. And, and so it's interesting to me how often, as soon as we start by, as soon as I give someone permission to love the community back, what we learn from them right away is that they're really excited to share their own story. It's just like they've been waiting for somebody else to say it's okay to do that.
My goodness. I want to thank both of you for making space for people to figure out to explore love, especially with a place, to realize that they too were someone who can contribute good, who can fall in love, who can bring people together, and that we're going to give these places the same grace we give that annoying cousin, right? Because we're all trying to figure out how to make it happen. I really appreciate both of you making time out to share your stories and to give your insight on this bit of text. I'm going to share with everyone where the poem comes from. It is called The City's Love by Claude McKay. Let me get I got my spectacles on. We had a whole conversation about me and my vanity blindness. It's new. Hey, aging, how are you doing? The City's Love by Claude McKay. For one brief golden moment, rare like wine, the gracious city swept across the line. Oblivious of the color of my skin, forgetting that I am an alien guest, she bent to me, my hostile heart to win, caught me in a passion to her pillowy breast, the great proud city seized with a strange love, bowed down for one flame hour, my pride to prove. And these two gentlemen have definitely shown how a city and a love for it brings pride to prove, all mixed up in another day of being alive, being focused. And what was it? What did you say, Ruben?
One team, one fight.
You were elevated. You're greeting. You're elevated. You're something. And
Oh, motivated, dedicated, and highly educated.
that's what we're about today, y'all. Thank you very much for being here. And we'll see you again next month with Alignment. One line of poetry, two guests, and an amazing conversation about all the ways there are to be here. Thank you.
Thanks.